the clients that you have, thousands of people, you've looked at their human design chart. I'm sure it's a vast range, but if there was an overarching theme.
8 years worth of studying this incredible system that is really precise in the information it gives us about who we are as individuals.
Into this space of business ownership and leading and doing all these things, and even this podcast, the more relying on spirit.
But most of the time people are coming to me because they feel underutilized in the world.
Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome back to Talkin St. Pete. I'm your host, Ryan Bogdan. And before we get into today's awesome guest, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Bogdan Homes. So if you know anyone looking to buy, sell, or invest here in the greater Tampa Bay area, please find our contact information in the description below, as we believe that luxury is an experience, not a price point, and we want to help you move to one of the greatest cities here in St. Petersburg. Or if you decide to leave and you're selling your home, we can help you do that too. And now to our awesome guest, Shakti Rios. She is a human design specialist and EFT practitioner.
Yes.
And we need to define what some of that means. But she is an amazing human being on a great mission. And I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
Shakti, welcome to Talkin St. Pete.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, absolutely. And shout out to Sandy Bean for connecting us.
Yes, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's doing a lot of cool things here and well connected. So I'm glad that we got this time here today. How did you end up in St. Pete?
So my best friend lives in St. Pete and she grew up here, lives here, and I'm from Miami, Florida originally.
Okay.
My husband and I are both from Miami, Florida. That's where we met when we were kids, but he had ended up moving up to Atlanta. I ended up moving up to Atlanta. We were there for however many years. And then in 2020, right at the beginning of 2020, I was like, I'm going to leave here. Like, I just had the feeling of leaving Atlanta, like the end of 2019. I'm like, we're moving. Packed up my business, like closed it. Our whole uprooted the whole family, like overnight, basically, to move here. Yeah.
So you were before the COVID.
I was. And I just had a feeling that I should leave where I was. And I had a massage therapy practice too in Atlanta. And there was this weird alarm bell, is how I describe it, inside of me at the end of 2019 that said, get out. Literally,
okay,
get out.
You knew, I might have missed that quickly. You knew someone living here.
Yeah, my best friend lives here. And so we visited, like we've been here to this coast and I really love this coast, you know, so I didn't want to move back east. I wanted to move here.
How intuitive.
So we did. It was a
And your husband, what was his vibe? Was he like, okay?
He was like, are you nuts? He was like, he's very logical and he's very like step by step. And I was like, not that person. I was like, you married the wrong human. This is not how this is going to go. We've got to go right now. And he didn't really get it, but he trusted me. And as it turned out, every step we took, everything just worked out. It was so interesting how everything lined up for us. And we signed our papers like the same day that we left Atlanta. Within 2 days we were here. It was January 13th when we purchased our home.
Wow.
It was like 2 weeks before the news went wild.
Right.
You know, literally right before. And I was like, well, and I had just closed my massage practice and I had decided not to go back to it after like almost a decade of doing that. And like my career would have been decimated. You know, that would have been one of the main careers that would have been taken out. And I just called it like right before it happened.
What about time? Like the timing of that is impeccable.
It was insane.
Wow.
It was really insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really cool. And to be ahead of the curve on that, because then look, 5 months later, everyone's moving here.
It was wild.
And you guys got in right before the...
And it was even more wild because like later on, like a couple weeks after we had moved here, when there was like, you know, riots and all this kind of stuff, the building where he worked caught on fire, like during his shift. It like he would have been there.
Wow.
It was nuts.
Like talk about just synchronicities and being in the right place, right time.
It was crazy. It was just crazy.
And how long did you have that feeling before you decided to make a move? Like, how impulsive was that, or was it?
So I got really sick August of 2019, which what I now suspect was super similar to COVID. And nobody knew about that then. But I had international clients as massage clients. And one of them had just come back from like Germany or something. So I suspect that I got this just way ahead because I was out for a week. I mean, cold, like non-functional. My in-laws had to take care of my son at the time, all this kind of stuff. And then right after that, I just kept being ill. It was like one thing after the other. And then I ended up with this kidney infection, like all this stuff started happening. And I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And it was during that time we went back home to visit and I was just like, we got to move. like closer home. Like our whole family's in Miami. I'm like, we got to go. We just have to go. So it was about, I would say 5 months prior to us actually leaving. That's a really short call for saying, we're going to pack up, we're going to leave.
Close the business, everything. Yeah.
And my husband didn't even know if he could get moved to a store down here because he's an assistant manager. And so he was like, he got the call that they had placement for him like Christmas Eve. Like we had already bought a house, like we're leaving, Like,
talk about belief and just really taking the leap. I can appreciate that. I really can. That's cool. That's cool. So what is a human design specialist and EFT practitioner? Because you've done some work to get this.
Yes, I have. I've done a lot. So human design is a system. And it is a system that I have been studying for about 8 years. It showed up in my life when my son was just born, and he'll almost be 8 in December. So 8 years worth of studying this incredible system that is really precise in the information it gives us about who we are as individuals. So that's what I love about this system, is that it really pinpoints these characteristics of us as individuals that demonstrate to us how we were designed to be different from the other. In very specific ways, like not just
how so? Give me an example.
So most people are familiar with astrology as a system where you use your birth information and you kind of look at a natal chart, and then there's like different forms of astrology. There's Vedic astrology, which is really popular in India and the East, and then there's Western astrology, which is what most people know of when it's like natal charts and house placements and this. Human design is a system where we are also using the birth information with a different intention. And so what happens is the way I describe how we get imprinted by neutrinos, which we now know that neutrinos carry mass since like the 90s. Neutrinos are very tiny particles, like space dust, you could say. Let's call it stardust, space dust, floating all around us all of the time, 24/7. So when this system was brought in 1987 and channeled, the person who brought it in was told, we are constantly being imprinted by these neutrinos. They're leaving like resonance in our field, and it's creating a distinction in how we operate depending on the exact time and place that we enter the planet. And at that time, nobody knew anything about neutrinos. And then like a decade later, they're like, oh, wait, yes, neutrinos have mass and they do affect us. Like science caught up to that, right? So this is just one of those phenomenal things that, came
This can be, is this happening on a quantum level?
Yes.
Because I know as we discover more about the quantum, we're like, okay, this is explaining some things that we didn't really understand.
Correct. But also on a physical level, just physical. So the way I like to describe an imprinting and how imagine, because there's 2 dates we look at. There's pre-birth, there's 88 degrees of solar arc before birth, and then there's birth time. That's also what makes human design as a system different, and so we're looking at 2 different dates, okay? But for the sake of simplicity, let's look at birth moment, when you come onto the planet. You come into the planet on a very specific time quality, is what I like to describe it as, the quality of time, right? This time is really elusive, but there's a quality to that time when you come into the planet. And if you think about your aura, which is clean and clear and brand new, being birthed into this time quality, and you have all these massive bodies that are sort of like camera filters that are just all around the cosmos at the moment of your birth. So there's massive filters like Jupiter, Saturn, the moon, the nodals, the nodes, which are not planetary bodies, but the nodes are in a certain position. All these things are like camera filters. So these neutrinos are coming through these filters with a quality. Once they pass that filter in a specific positioning, it carries a quality to it. So now that neutrino is different because it's imprinted by this planetary filter. And those neutrinos rush into your aura and they ping into your aura and they create almost like a resonance. Like they mark you with this resonance that's unique to you. Ryan came in at this time. This is Ryan's resonance, right?
I'm following.
Yeah. And so this is what makes you so different than other people who are born at a minute later or even, 2 minutes later or whatever. There's a different quality to time, just slightly so, so we get these really individualized versions of humans, what it means to be human. So in an ideal world, you're walking around with your resonance, with your frequency, and you are toning with other things in your frequency that match you. And you are having this great experience of being in frequency and, vibing with the things that are meant for you. That's the ideal world. And then when we're born and we live, we get conditioned by our parents, by traumas, by the things that happened. And so this starts to really warp our frequency. It stops being the pure tone that it was intended to be, and it starts being a little wonky. And when that tone starts being a little wonky, all of a sudden you start pulling in things that are not a good match. And these are the experiences that we then have to work through.
So just it's like the pure version of yourself, right? Because I know we did this, and I'm going to dive into mine.
The true version,
the true version of you.
Yeah.
But then life comes in and says, well, you had this thing happen to you, and this was a condition of your environment, and that which sways you from the truth.
Just changes the tone just slightly. Yeah.
Right. And so, what is it about human design? Is it bringing people back to them understanding why they act a certain way, feel a certain way, or what comes natural to them?
It's returning them to who they are.
Yeah.
That's really the point of human design.
Right, because I know some people listening right now are like, okay, this is a little deep, right?
Totally.
Yeah, we got to go deep.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are all individuals.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think we can agree that everyone is different, like snowflakes. And so what?
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly.
And so what makes the snowflake different? And what is the true original form of the snowflake? Is that a good way to break it down?
That's a great, really simple analogy to say it's saying that we're snowflakes is not just like a cute metaphor. It's like literally true. We are different in the way that we are built, like from a quantum level to a physical level. This is how you can have even twins. This is a great example. Like you have twins that are born same day, same time, same place, whatever, have completely different experiences of reality. They might have very, very similar designs in terms of human design, but the way they interact with the conditioning and their experiences is going to be very, very different, which means that different aspects of their design will become prevalent versus others, right? So, yes. This is the science of how we are different. That is human design, the science of how we are different.
Right, and different from astrology or, looking at it's just more specific, I think.
It is more, I would say it's more individual focused, whereas I feel like with astrology, there's a really beautiful overarching thing. You can look at cycles really beautifully. You can look at archetypes really beautifully, general dispositions and interactions really beautifully. Human design is really like zoomed into the person, to the individual, and breaking down facets of that individual's. For me, what I do the most professionally is genius optimization. That's really where my juice comes in. It's like, how do we optimize a person's genius? Because my personal belief is that every single human on the planet has genius. I think we've been conned into believing that only some people are geniuses and other people are just kind of like whatever, and that's not true.
It depends on what you're using to measure. What scale are you using to measure genius?
Yes, for one. And for two, if we look at like the origin of that word, like genius was originally like a muse that would visit people. And this is like in Greek Roman times, they believed that genius was something that would visit you. And so you would kind of set the arena for genius to visit, and then you would get these insights and these really, and over time we've changed that to mean something that you're born with, like linked to genetics and, capabilities and stuff. And so I recently learned that about the history of genius, and it made sense why my own personal understanding of it is so different than what we do now. Because I've seen, at this point, thousands of charts, and I've worked with thousands of clients, and I've never looked at a chart and been like, there is no genius here. Like, I've never done that. It's never happened.
Yeah, I guess it's just how far removed is the person from, right?
Some people have no awareness at all that they have these components. And I think a huge part of that is they never looked because they just believed that some people are born geniuses and some people aren't, like we just accept that.
And this is such a cool topic because you have to be open-minded to the maybe the original narrative of society and what we're the mainstream narrative is of what to believe, right? Or your even religious beliefs or whatever, right? And I think St. Pete, to bring it back to that, is unique in that there's a lot of open-minded individuals here from the art community, even the way the business owners, just even the way people dress and walk around and carry themselves. It's cool that you're here doing that because it just aligns and makes a lot of sense. So why do people, what's the main reason? Why do I come to you? Am I introduced to you? Am I seeking this out? Like, the clients that you have, thousands of people, you've looked at their human design chart. What's their, I'm sure it's a vast range, but if there was an overarching theme.
Stuck.
Yeah.
The number one reason people come see me, and interestingly enough, it's been a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, I've really been like a magnet for entrepreneurs and people seeking like, how do I get better at this, or like help my business or things like this. And I love business. I've been an entrepreneur for 14 years. So it's probably also that I love it because I've done it and I have so much experience in that world. And I think it's so cool that you can take an idea, a passion of yours, and do something, epic with it and serve people in this massive kind of way. Like the whole concept of business to me is fascinating. And that's also in my design. So that makes sense why I'm like so drawn to it. But most of the time people are coming to me because they feel underutilized in the world.
I get that. And it makes sense that entrepreneurs would be one of your customers because I feel like in that realm, especially once you start to have success, then it just becomes of, well, what's next, or what's this for? Why am I doing this? Yeah. Is it aligned? Is it really what I want to do? Because once your basic human needs are covered, now it's like, well, what?
Big questions.
Yeah, what now? Right?
And there's three entrepreneurs that I usually see. It's the first one is the one that's just starting out, and they're just like, I have this idea, but I don't even know where to start, or what my gift is here, or how I do it differently, or they're really just starting to differentiate themselves from other people, and so human design can serve them in that. The second group are the people that have been in business for a while, but something is not working anymore, and so the pivot comes in. I call those the pivot people. They're like, something needs to change. I don't know what it is, but I'm just not vibing, with what I've created. And then the last camp are the burn everything to the ground and run people.
Oh, no.
Like, I am exhausted. I am out. I don't want to do this anymore. Those people. And so they come to me because they're like, help. Like, I need to start from ground zero. And I have plenty of those they've built really unsustainable businesses that either were not based on their genius and their gifts, or, they did it to prove to someone or something that they were, and so that happens a lot of burnout people.
And so what happens, share some success of, okay, so now I've come with you, you've helped me discover the genius, but what are we doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to come back in harmony with our true self?
This is where the EFT comes in.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm so glad you segued like a boss right into that so effortlessly. So EFT is it's a healing modality. So I do two really separate things. Human design for me is about raising awareness and bringing people to themselves with this really beautiful, mechanical, precise system that is so self-revelatory and will just kind of work its way through you the longer you sit with it. EFT is a healing modality, and it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's most commonly known by people as tapping technique. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And so how the basic science behind that is activating acupressure. So in the same way that acupuncture works on the meridians in the body, we are using acupressure, so our hand, right, to either tap. Most people tap, but you can also press or rub. Those are other ways that you can access that meridian point in order to move emotion through the body and regulate. And what's fascinating to me about the science behind EFT is that without even addressing an issue, let's say you just sat in front of me and I said, hey, you're going to tap with me for 5 minutes on nothing. We're not going to say anything. We're not going to address any issues. I just want you to tap. You could lower your cortisol levels by 50% in those 5 minutes just from that. That's how powerful of a modality this is, and it's super simple and it's very gentle, right? Now you add to that addressing traumas and issues, and now you get permanent brain rewiring and resolution, which is what's really mind-blowing about this system. That what it's basically doing is short-circuiting this limbic response that keeps people in PTSD and like trauma response. It stops that. It stops the amygdala, the back of your brain, from exploding or reacting or having those moments.
Fight or flight.
Yeah, it just cuts it off totally. And it allows your prefrontal cortex to come online so that you can get creative and find solutions where you couldn't before.
Right.
So it's just, to me, that modality is epic.
Yeah.
I've used it for years. I've seen it work in a variety of different arenas. And so this is what I bring into this. So once we start learning about who we are and we're like, I am way off track, which happens a lot. People are like, I am like, I know what you're saying is true because I can feel it, but I'm so over here, like I'm nowhere near here. I'm like, okay, well then we start breaking that down bit by bit and we start working through the shadow elements of a person's chart. That's what I call the shadow elements, where we're not in our light, where we're kind of hiding or, you know, still dealing with trauma or conditioning or things like this. Use the EFT, handle that. And what ends up happening inevitably is just a natural return to who they actually are meant to be. Like it just happens. You don't really have to do anything because this is who you are.
Well, I think there's something to that. Putting the spotlight on it, and now we are focusing on it, and then you become your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right.
And so your design is always who you are. You are that. You are Ryan's design 100% of the time. You don't have to try to be that. What we try to do is get rid of everything that's not you.
Right.
So that you can just be you.
I gotta tickle my throat. Yeah, for all the other reasons of trauma and the things that we're trying to do to mask our true selves.
And to deal with life, you know.
And how cool is it when people become realigned? Because then things just flow effortlessly.
You know, the number one thing I notice is the joy that comes back into their eyes, into their whole demeanor. It's like they were an off switch for 30, 40 years, and then they're just on again, you know?
Yeah, the lights are on.
Yeah.
The color's back.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's epic.
That is cool. We just had Eileen and Allie on who were, they're, you know, same thing. Frequency of joy is their whole thing, and following the path of joy. Yeah, they're really sweet.
Yeah,
so
they are.
it's cool to hear it. Like there's different. One of my favorite sayings, I have a lot, but one of is there's many paths to the Buddha, and that's so true because you could use this technique and have the awareness here. You could go over there with Allie and Eileen. You could go do a yoga practice. You could find there's so many different ways to get there, but it's first starts with awareness.
Yeah, there's as many different ways as there are people, and we already know based on human design how many different people there are.
Yeah. Well, I brought my chart.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
you came prepared.
I came prepared, and so I don't know what this means, and I don't know how maybe here, right? We can kind of see on camera. For those watching here, I'll kind of just try to describe it.
I can't wait to. This is gonna be so
There's a silhouette of a body that kind of looks like a triangle with a head, and there's all these triangles, lines, and numbers and colors. It does kind of look like it could be a diagram to an airport terminal.
This description leads no one any closer to knowing what you're talking about.
I'm doing the best. The best thing is probably to just Google human design.
I have a free chart generator on my site.
There
you
you
can
go.
actually
Boom.
get a free one.
Boom.
My site.
Go on. What's your website?
ShaktiRios.com.
ShaktiRios.com. We'll put it right here.
You can generate your chart.
Generate your chart so you're not taking my horrible description of what this is. And you definitely need Shakti to decipher this because it's like hieroglyph. I can't even say the word. It's some different language.
Yes.
So
it is.
Yeah.
It is. You're right.
Okay, so what are we looking at? What's your description of this chart? Because I'm all tongue twisted.
So this is a pretty good description, what you've described. You can see there's a silhouette of a person, and overlaid over the silhouette of a person is a set of shapes, and a combination of triangles, diamond shapes, square shapes, and how they all relate. And if familiar with the chakra system, you will look at this and go, this looks a little bit like a chakra system. Chakra system is 7-centered. This is a 9-centered body graph. There's a reason for why that is. That goes a little bit into like origin story. We're going to get sidetracked, so I'm going to pause that there.
Yeah. Put that over
but
here. Yeah.
It looks a lot like you would say chakras. There's a head, there's a mind, a throat, heart, solar plexus, root, sacral, right? So more or less, you can get kind of an image of this. And depending on your chart, some of these centers are going to have color and some of them are not. Some of them are going to be white, some of them are going to have color. This tells a story as well. You will notice that the centers also have numbers. These numbers are what we call gates, or in the I Ching, they're known as hexagrams. So if you're familiar with the I Ching.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the I Ching is a very ancient Chinese system.
Got it.
It is used for divination, but it also is really, I've found it to be really, almost tells the story of humanity. It's like a 64 hexagrams that tell a really complete story of what it means to be like a person, like being, I should say, not person, a being. And so, they looked at the I Ching, the 64 hexagrams kind of span all 365 days of the year. So there's actually a way to read what hexagram or what gate the planets are in as the year goes on. And these are called transits. In astrology, they also read transits. We just read a kind of different version of that. And so these transits, as they move, they tell a different story of what's happening, like the theme of what's happening on the planet. And what's so interesting is if you want to take a planetary body like Mercury, for example, and you look at the gate that Mercury is transiting, and then you look at the news, it'll be like the exact themes of where Mercury is. It's the wildest.
It's a whole Mercury in retrograde. What's happening?
Because Mercury is a planet of communication. So whenever I look at where Mercury is stationed, it's weird. It's like we're going to be talking about that for the next 4 or 5 days, and you'll see it. You'll see it on the news. It's like whatever theme that gate is accenting, it's bananas.
Well, I have a lot of we could go down a whole rabbit hole on why, like my thoughts on energy and gravitational pull and energy and the stardust. I mean, it's the more that comes out about the quantum, the more fascinating, and it's hard to deny. That there's a greater whatever. I don't care what your belief is, right?
A greater organization,
yes,
to time and space than we think.
An understanding, right? We can't forget that at one point we thought that the Earth was in the center of the universe.
Yes.
And if you still believe that,
this might not be the podcast for you. That's okay.
I don't know what to say, but we know that's not true. But once we did, so I when I think about these things, I go, well, what do we think is currently true that's not?
Yeah.
What are we on the way to discover? And so this is where being open-minded comes into play.
Totally.
Yes. Okay. So
you have these centers.
Break me down.
Break you down.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at Ryan's chart, he has really only 2 of these centers defined. So we're going to keep this kind of really simple so people can kind of understand. Every center has a theme to it. So we're looking at the head center. The shadow of this center is thinking about things that don't matter. So this is the design of someone who can easily go down a rabbit hole of things that not really pertinent or matter.
Oh, fair.
Really. With an undefined mind, the shadow behavior, that is someone who really struggles with the opinions of others and is constantly wanting to be certain. So people with an undefined mind are like, I need to be sure, I need to be sure, I need to be sure. That's like the thing, but they're not designed to be that. They're designed to be open to possibility, different opinions and different things. I call this design, the open-headed mind, which is very common and most people have it, the market to me design. Because we are the suckers for marketing. Like marketing was made for these people, for the undefined head in mind, because we will just buy whatever. If you tell us we need it, maybe, yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Instagram ads were made for us. Like that's basically who they made it for, 70% of the population. Okay. And then you have the defined throat. This is the consistent ability to speak, but when it's in your case, it's defined, but undefined shadow might be really wanting recognition and struggling with not receiving it and doing whatever you can just to get it. That's the undefined or the white shadow. In your case, you have a defined throat. This is someone who feels like they have a pretty consistent voice when whatever space they're in, whether you're here or you're, working or selling or, relating, your voice stays pretty consistent. And in your design, you have your voice, your throat connected to your identity center. So when you speak, there is this speaking from who I am. I share from who I am. This is a big part of what you do. And the only channel that you have here connecting, you have 2 connecting the throat to the heart, which is so fascinating, or to the identity center, is the witness channel. That was the biggest one that stood out to me because you podcast. So you have this ability to really listen to people and then tell their stories and share their stories. There's a big energy here of wanting to witness other people and then share what you have witnessed for the benefit of other people so that they can learn and experience. And then you have the 10-20. That's the other channel that connects your identity center to the throat, which the 10, you can look at this as correct behavior of self, knowing what's correct for self. You could also look at this as like self-love, right? So how do I behave correctly for me, which can be said self-love, right? Self-love is like, how do I take care of me? How do I behave correctly for me? So this self-love in the now, in the present moment. What is correct for me right now? There's a big impetus for you to know and be present with the current moment. And so if you find yourself trying to rush through time and space, you've like lost a big part of your design. Design. Mm-hmm. And because you have these two channels to the throat, right? You speak from who you are. Simultaneously, when you receive criticism, it goes straight to the core of who you are. Right? So when you receive voice of criticism, it also goes right in. So I see this and I see a child, maybe, who did not do so well with harsh criticism from parents, that this is like a sore point for you growing up. And things went straight in that are still hard for you maybe as an adult to handle now. Possibly.
Oh, yeah. Nothing comes to mind when you say that, which is good, but who knows, right?
Yeah.
It's probably buried.
Good or not good, you know? But this is typically what I'll say. I'll say to parents, if I'm doing a reading, I'll be like, be mindful that this is a child that speaks from who they are. But also when they receive criticism, it's straight here, straight to the core. So just be mindful of that. Something good to note. But with a design like this, where you have only two centers defined, you have a very concentrated energy, which is nice. It's a really concentrated, these are my gifts, they're right here. It's very, when you have a chart with a lot going on, sometimes, people can feel like they're a little bit all over the place because they have multiple different interests. This is something we look at when it comes to definition. You have single definition, so all of your centers connect. And you have this like quick energy about you. But there are people who have kind of islands of definition in their chart, and they're split, and so they feel like they're two different people or three different people depending on what their chart looks like. So this can get quite a bit more complex in terms of talent and presence.
So you're saying I'm simple.
You're concentrated, Ryan. That's a different word. You're concentrated. It's not the same.
Hey, I break things down to a fourth grade level here.
So in your case, and most people's cases, when I'm looking at their charts, what I'm really looking at are the centers that are white to tell me a story of where possible conditioning can live. Not that we don't get conditioned where we are defined, but it's almost like where you're defined, you're a bit more protected in your definition from absorbing the conditioning from other people. Where you are white, you are more variable in your experience of those centers, so you're more susceptible to receiving them. So, for example, with the open throat, the strong need for recognition and wanting to be seen, and that can be a struggle for so many people all of their life. If they don't get like recognition from their parents and they grow up just kind of being those adults that want to be seen. We all know them. They're all over Instagram, like showing off lifestyles and things of this nature where you're like questionable at best. And you have an undefined G center. So when this diamond in the center is white, there's this question of who am I, right? There's a big searching of like, I don't know who I am. They're looking for love in all the wrong places. This is also governs like love and direction as the center. So those are the people who are struggling with their identity and also like kind of looking at other people to love them so they can feel loved. This is a shadow of this.
You're saying I have that?
You do not. You have a defined G center.
Okay. What up, G?
The undefined, that's the gravitational center. So speaking of gravity, and this is called the monopole as well, and this is what actually holds us as an illusion together. This is a whole other rabbit hole, quantum related. So you have this triangle right here, which has to do with things like willpower and commitment. This is what we call the ego. And when you have an undefined ego, as is here in the chart, a big struggle of that is wanting to prove that you're good enough, or smart enough, or strong enough, or capable enough. And so with entrepreneurs, I run into a lot that these people will build businesses based on wanting to prove to mom and dad that they were good at something, not necessarily based on what they wanted to do. And then they burn out and they hit a wall of unsustainability. And then they have to kind of backtrack and start over.
Got it.
Very common.
So be careful.
The undefined emotional center is someone who amplifies the emotions of others. So this is the empath design. So a lot of time these people are called dramatic, especially when they're growing up, when in reality they're not. What they're doing is amplifying the emotions of everyone around them. So with undefined emotional center, you have to be really mindful of the spaces that you're in because you are kind of taking on everybody else's emotions. And the struggle becomes what is mine, what is not mine in terms of feelings. And that can get very overwhelming for the undefined emotional center. With an undefined root, this is like inconsistent ability to respond in pressures. So like constant pressure, not so good for the undefined root. You can kind of wing it in bits and pieces, but not all of the time. Like people that can just constantly operate under pressure, that's not for the undefined or white root. This also governs cortisol in the body. So it's really important that if you have an undefined root, you understand your cortisol is really sensitive. So just be mindful of that. With an undefined spleen, this is someone who doesn't have a really consistent way of regulating their health or fear. So these designs, this is something I look at a lot with kids, because when an undefined spleen child doesn't have security or doesn't feel safe as a kid, they grow up really anxious. This is where I see a lot of like attachment issues in adults, constant fear, the desire to hold on to things for far longer than is good for them, just kind of like hoping that it gets better. And like, especially if you're partnered with someone who has this defined, then they give you that feeling of like, oh, I'm okay. So then you don't want to let them go.
Well, and the fear thing is, because I feel like my fear is, well, I'm an adrenaline junkie. So
You don't say.
you see that? I don't know.
You have an
What
undefined root. Yeah. So you want that hike of like feeling energy, right? Because you're really kind of naturally by design not like this. You're more variable, right? So you get like spurts, but it's not like consistent. So when you do get it, it like activates that part of you that's like, yeah, do the thing.
No, it needs to be crazy because if not, I'm just.
Yeah, and you also have an undefined sacral center, which is about energy. So you also have inconsistent access to generating your own energy. So you like being around people who have this defined or doing things that make you feel that jolt for the same reason.
Accurate. Accurate. There was something about the ego you said over here.
Needing to prove. This is the emotional center.
There was something I wanted to comment on, but I forget.
Amplifying the emotions of others. That one.
Oh, I'm feeling that.
Yes.
There is times.
Yeah.
That is real. Maybe some others can relate with me. When you walk in I can feel the room.
Same.
You know, and
I also have that undefined. That's 50% of the population has this like you. Yeah.
And when you feel that, it's you're like, yeah, where is it? What is this coming from? What is going on? You know?
Or you walk into a restaurant and you're like, I don't like this restaurant. Like immediately.
Yeah.
Like I'm out. I don't want to be here.
The energy's not good. The vibe is stale. You know, when I get in front of my team at the office and 40, 50 people in the room and they're not on the, like, I'm like, yo, y'all need to do something. Like, stand up.
You're messing me up.
You're messing me up. I can feel it. Yeah. Which I think is cool because it's ability to read the room.
Yeah. Read the emotion in the room for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the overall thing? What about all this stuff over here? That is just
There's so much. There's so much.
I feel like we could spend a whole thing, and I don't want to bore everyone with my chart, but I mean, this is fascinating, and maybe it's inspiring some others to figure out what they have going on.
I will say one thing we can talk about.
What's my greatest strength?
First of all, your greatest strength is that you are a projector by design. So this is kind of like where I start everybody. There are 4 different main types of energy fields on the planet. There's the generator type, which is about 70% of the population. These are the self-generating beings that have the energy. Sandy is a version of this. Lots of energy all of the time. And then you have the projector, which is your design and my design. We were both projectors. That's 20% of the population. You have the manifester, which is 9%, and then you have 9% bouts, and then you have a reflector, which is very rare. That's like a 1% of the population type of design. So that's like this main aura type sort of designates your predominant strength as an aura, I would say. So like as a projector, we have what's called the focused penetrative absorbing aura. So when we sit with someone, we're like going right into them and we're reading behind what we're receiving. So this is the capacity to see deeply into the other and to experience the other with great wisdom. We're not great at seeing ourselves. That's the thing about the projector aura. Not fantastic. We do need someone else to kind of show us what's going on with us.
Yeah.
Yes. But we are so good with the other, deeply good with the other. And so what's interesting about that is it makes other people uncomfortable.
Keep going. Yeah.
Unless someone invites you into their space. So unless someone wants to sit with you or asks you for your advice or something like this, if you just deliver it, it does not go well
Yeah.
most of the time.
I remember us talking about that on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're right.
Yeah.
I can see past the curtain.
Yes.
And I don't like to be surface level, so I'm
Yeah.
going to go deep
That's very
on it.
projector. That's
Yeah. And hopefully you're okay because I'm already in there.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
But so the way the projector is meant to like kind of ease that a bit and not come off as being so abrasive is by allowing someone to see them and recognize them first and invite them into the space. So once you get an invitation in, someone says, hey, Ryan, can I get your perspective on this? Or I'd like to work with you or something like this. Now the way has been made for you to be able to show up and share your brilliance and reduce that resistance. That's really nice. Right. Then you get seen as a genius.
Yeah, but if not, the walls go.
You're correct.
Yeah.
If not, people are like, who is this dude? Get out of here.
Shining light on things I don't want the light shined on.
It gets really uncomfortable. Yeah. That's super, super true. So that, the generators are very different. That's the majority of your listeners are going to be generators. These are very warm, friendly. They have a very enveloping aura, so they pull things into them, right? They're the most loyal, most warm of the bunch. And they're the builders. They're really here to make things happen because they have the energy to do that, right? We're here to manage.
Yeah.
Our projectors are like the managers.
I got the vision.
We're guiding. We're guiding this process. Generators are the ones generating, putting in the energy. Then you have the manifestors that are like leaders, very strong leaders. They're not really here to wait for timing of any kind except their own. And these people often face a lot of resistance because you either see them for their leadership and accept them, or you're like, this person's the worst. So this is manifestors are constantly facing this kind of resistance about them. And then reflectors are because their design is so open, they're lunar beings. Every other type is a solar being. They are lunar beings. They're white. They have no definition in their chart. So they're just very, I experience them as being very expansive beings. They're just so multifaceted, and so their aura is supposed to be very sampling. So they're almost never one thing or the other. It's a very I see them like a wave, experiencing, just all about the experiencing.
Yep.
So every aura just has such a different signature to it, and that's one of the first things your audience can really start to see about themselves is when you run your chart and you see it says type and what that is, really working with that and being okay, so is this how people experience me? Even ask them. If you're a generator, ask your friends how they experience you. If you're a projector or manifestor, and they'll tell you, because they can see you better than you can see yourself,
right.
Likely.
I think it's always interesting to get perspective from your top 5.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because how you perceive yourself and how the other, that perception is reality. Mm-hmm. And so you get the collective of that.
Yes. One thing I knew right away is people always came to me for advice my whole life, even as a teenager. My friends would be like, yeah, can you help me out? They would call me and be like, can you give me some advice? Mm-hmm. And I was like, this makes sense. I am a projector. That would be why, because I could just see things that they would miss. That was very much how I was in the friend space. And so there's hints all along the way about your type. If you go back, kind of compare notes, you'll see that.
Okay, so we know we have this, and so then it would be coming into, like we talked about before, you understand these things about, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. It feels right. And now we need to focus. Is it focus on those things? Is it become the awareness? Is it, I'm just trying to figure out.
How to work with it.
Yeah.
So the number one thing I tell everybody is learning about your strategy and your authority. That's super, super important. And if you're in the human design world, this gets harped constantly. What these two words mean is every aura type has a strategy by which they are meant to communicate with the quantum. So we all have a way, a language, so to speak, by which we dialogue. As a projector, our way is to be recognized and be invited. So let's say, give you an example, you want to speak at a gig, this big event is coming up. It would be incorrect for you to start emailing people to see make your way in. That's the fastest way for you to be rejected from that environment. It would be more correct for you to see where you get recognized in terms of talent and where you could make allies until you receive an invitation to that event. And then when you receive the invitation to that event, then you're being recognized for it. Then you can decide whether you want to take the invitation or not. Okay. Every type has a way by which they're meant to dialogue. That's really super important to understand and to work with that for a while. And then the second part is the authority, which is how we make decisions. So once you're in the dialogue, how you make a decision is the next thing that you need to learn. So for example, you are a coordinator and your authority is self. You are self-identity projector. So here we are. When it comes to making a decision, the easiest, fastest way for you to decide is, does this feel like me? Does this feel like me? If it doesn't feel like me, it's going to be a no. Fastest way for you to make a decision.
Yep.
Right? And so that requires, though, that you know me. Yeah. That you really understand what me is.
Yeah.
So if there's trauma around the identity, again, going back to the EFT, then that's where we have to go first so that you can really begin to know self and trust self. Because all of your decisions are going to be based off of that. But everybody has a different authority. I have splenic authority. This is very intuitive, in the moment, instinctual. Yes, no. I'm not thinking about it. It's flowing through me. And if I hesitate, I miss the boat. Like it's like quick. Like my decision to move here, right? It was like boom, on. Okay, let's go. You know. So knowing your strategy and your authority and then working with that. In design, we call it working with the experiment of your design because this is an experiment. It's a living experiment. It's not a one and done. It's not like, okay, got this piece of paper.
Right.
See ya, you know? No, it's like now I have to engage with this thing, this knowledge that is me, this wisdom that has reintroduced me to me. And I have to experiment with these components of my design to see how the response I get from the other, right?
Yeah, see where you're... As you're saying that, it's like, okay, where does the energy flow naturally?
Yeah. Do I see a response when I, instead of initiating things, which is what we would want to do, if I wait until I get the recognition, how different does that feel comparatively, right?
It is interesting to think about how people make decisions.
Mentally, always.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like, are you an analyzer? Are you quick to go off the gut? Do you need to think about it? Do you need to gather facts? Are you... how do you process that information and really break that down? And everyone does it differently, even set goal. I don't know. It's the mind is so fascinating. That's really, it really
well,
is.
Design tells us no decision is meant to be made through the mind. Not one.
And that's where a lot of them happen.
And that's where they're all, in this society especially, it's like make a pros list and a cons list. What's logical? Everybody makes decisions that way. And I'm like, that's the fastest way to end up really sad on this planet.
Because we're making too many decisions with the wrong parts of our body.
Design says that's not what happens in the mind. The mind is to analyze. The mind is to process. The mind is to experience different angles and perspectives and then kind of play with that. It's like a playground. This is how design looks at the mind. It's not the place from which we decide. We decide from authority. We decide from within us. And that's different centers depending on, your design, or if you are a mental projector, which means you only have definition up here, then it's acoustic by nature. You're the way you make decisions. So it's about listening to yourself. And the easiest way to do that is by talking to someone and then hearing yourself say things. Or one thing I tell my clients is recording themselves and then hearing that back, because then you hear so much underneath. Right? So at no point in design is there an authority that's mental. That is not a thing. Really,
that
even mental
might be
authority
one
is
of the biggest takeaways so far for me in that moment right there is knowing that, but then saying it out loud of that your decisions shouldn't be made.
Never.
Well, because you're not, just because it's logical doesn't mean it feels right.
Right. Yeah. And logic is a pattern that exists throughout the chart, right? So it's like you could have a lot of logic patterning in your chart, which makes you by nature a very logical person, but it doesn't just live in the mind. And I think this is one of the most fascinating things about design is when you start to look at circuitry and things like that, you realize, wow, patterning, like logic patterning shows up in multiple spaces in design. And we just attribute that to being a function of the mind. Like we say, it lives there.
Yeah. We are deep. We are deep.
We put two projectors together. Where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I know. We're down. I mean, and this could go, if we weren't live, we would go so much deeper on this because people would start thinking these two. They can't keep up. Yeah, we're drilling to the core of the earth here. It's true. It's true. You know, some people, I don't know. I love this. I think it's fascinating. And, I think it's important for all of us to have some self-discovery at different stages in our life, especially when you're looking to grow and do big things. And it makes sense that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs because we are, Steve Jobs said something in his book that the world is more like has a plasticity to it. It's like plastic, and that only those who believe that they can change the world can.
Yes.
And so you can mold and shape it.
It's just like your brain.
Exactly.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, and to your point of like the new neural connections through tapping, and there's so many ways to create new neural pathways.
Yeah. But it's possible. I think the most important thing people need to hear is that it's possible. Too many people think they are fixed, either by their circumstances or the things that have happened to them or things of that nature. And even though like in human design, you don't change your design. Your design is your design, but how you interact with that is completely up to you, and to what degree you experience the shadow or the mastery of any aspect of your chart is entirely up to you.
Yeah,
that's where the plasticity comes in.
We got to keep talking on that offline because I'm fascinated. I want to know more, especially at this point as we grow the show and lots of things are happening and we're new. I mean, we only been in St. Pete for 2 years, and I feel like for myself, I tell people I'm overwhelmed with joy. Overwhelmed, but with joy. Yeah. And a lot of good things are happening, I think, for the city and those that come here, including myself and the team. And we're just always looking to grow and better ourselves. And this is one way to bring a little more awareness to what comes natural. So I find that fascinating. So let's walk real quickly because I wanted to ask you some things about St. Pete. But if we definitely had to pique someone's interest, and they want to know more or they want to go through this with you. So the best thing is to go to your website.
Yeah, that's the best thing. Right away you'll get a free chart, and it'll give you a lot of information already that you can.
You'll get a chart, folks, but you won't understand what the heck it means.
It's a good starting place.
You're like, this is pretty colors and there's numbers.
Yeah, and then you can, if you decide, I'm all in, I definitely want to do this. I have a variety of different style of consultations. Like I have one that I do for parents to understand their children. I have one that I do just foundational for anybody who's really new to the knowledge. I have a business alignment one, which is really about looking at your business and your design and giving you kind of a template for how to redirect.
Give me the 2-minute spiel on how you got introduced to this.
During my Saturn return, for anybody who knows about astrology, I was 28 and I had just had my first son and my world was falling apart. It literally was like the worst.
Did you say your Saturn return?
Saturn return. This happens to every person between the ages of 20 and 30. If you think back to that age in your life, that's when massive change is happening in your life. Massive identity stuff.
But okay, so we're calling it a Saturn return.
It's called Saturn return because this is where the planet Saturn comes back to its original position in your chart from the moment of birth. It has about a 30-year cycle.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so we learned. I didn't know. That's why I'm like, I don't know.
So when Saturn returns,
so when Saturn returned,
yes, you really become an adult. So astrologically, up until age 30, you're a child. You're not really an adult. You're just a kid.
Yep.
Okay. So age 30 is like when your adulthood really kicks up, and that's a pivotal moment in like most people's lives. So this is entering yours. So let's see. Stages of life. You are at what? February 2022. Yeah, right. That's where your Saturn return was. Last year's where it started. So this wisdom is entering your life right when it entered mine. And my whole life was, I postpartum depression and anxiety, super bad. And interestingly enough, when I went back to work as a therapist, the person they had hired to fill in for me for a little bit is the person who introduced me to design. And she saw that I was a projector, and she's like, you really need to know this stuff. She was like, take the time. Then she literally disappeared from my life, and I never saw her again.
Whoa.
It was the most bizarre, experience.
Yeah.
And
Here's the door to walk through, and I'm out.
I literally, and I thank her till this day every time, she changed the course of my life just with this one thing, And I knew when I started down the rabbit hole of this that this was going to be what I did. It was in the back of my mind, I had met my match in terms of my level of interest, and projectors are designed for systems. We're really good at systems. When we find a system that we love, we're like, we can master that in no time flat. So I had found my system, so to speak. And it would take years until I felt ready enough to teach it and serve it, the way that I did. I spent a lot of time just studying it for myself. But yeah, that's how it entered
Okay,
my
got
world.
it. So when Saturn came back.
Yes. And Saturn is a planet of, it's interesting. It's like the dad planet. That's how it, like, the disciplinarian, the rules, discipline. This is the energy of Saturn. It's a teacher is what it is, a massive teacher planet. So when it comes around at age 30 is when you start to develop discipline. It's really when you start to become like a more mature version. That's where you can see that it says maturity right next to where the Saturn return date is, because that's really where that begins to happen. And what's interesting, fun fact, what people call midlife crisis, right?
Yeah.
Like, having a midlife crisis. It's like, no, that's called Uranus opposition. So everybody goes through this.
So when's mine? What year
Yours is 2036.
All right, we got some time.
Here's what happens
What
in
are we buying in
2036. Uranus has like an 84-year transition, right? So Saturn is 30, Uranus is much longer. So when Uranus is at its mid-opposition, like midway to coming full circle, right? Because it'll return to its original position when you're 84, from when you were born. That's how long a cycle is. But when it's midway there, which would be about 40s and 50s, right? We're in the 40s range. All of a sudden, Uranus is a planet of liberation. So it's like a rebel planet. So what it wants to do is free you from the things that are not working. So a lot of people end up going through divorces and all kinds of things that think about it. Think about what the typical midlife crisis thing happens, right? Yeah. Because it's breaking shackles. So that's what it's designed to do. It shakes up perception of like, what have I done? What have I built? Like, this isn't me, and it wants you to be free. So this is what people commonly know. We know these cycles. We all know these cycles. We just don't know that they have like an astrological name for them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, this is real. At 28 to 30, life-changing. 40s, being 40, life-changing for another reason, and then at 50s, you have another cycle from a different planet. And it's another, so it's...
Yeah, this is cool. This is cool. Yeah. Okay, so you're vibing in the right area, St. Pete, right? Because
yes.
a lot of this. I mean, there's yoga studios popping up everywhere. This is a vibe. I mean, so back to you came here at the right as COVID was starting. The city looked a little bit different at that time. You maybe knew it to be a little bit different. How have you seen it transform since you've been here?
Interestingly enough, I live in Pinellas Park, and I've really, really seen a difference in the past 3 years. Yeah. Just that. So Pinellas Park is about 15 minutes from St. Pete. Yep. And I've really seen it grow, like blossom. Like when I first moved in, it was kind of quiet over there, and now it's become like so diverse and so dynamic. New buildings everywhere. There's just a lot of new being built around and being like. Prettified, is how I like to say that. Like my own neighborhood, is people started fixing their houses, and they started like everybody's just suddenly wanting to take care of their stuff. There's just like this energy like this. But I have been coming to St. Pete on and off for many years. I didn't really realize the vibe as much until I moved here, and I was like kind of going out more and spending more time, But I'm really involved in the entrepreneurs space that Sandy created. I'm quite present in that girl boss space. And I just love how creative and how ambitious that group of women are and what they're doing in the world in so many different ways. There's so much that's happening. So I think this is not just a creative spiritual hub, but also for entrepreneurs. It's like a magnet for them. Like so really many entrepreneurs are
really
here.
Is. Yeah.
Different, all kinds.
Do you have any idea why that might be? From your perspective?
Yeah, my perspective is that the call to be an entrepreneur is a spiritual call. I really do think that it is. I think it's a soul call to do more, be more, to experience more than on your terms, And so I'm not surprised that these two worlds cross paths. Like you have this really kind of spiritually involved community that also has a lot of entrepreneurs, because I've yet to have to meet an entrepreneur who wasn't in some way, shape, or form in the question. You know what I mean? To whatever degree the question is for them that wasn't there. I haven't. And I think it's because entrepreneurship to me also mirrors like motherhood a lot. For me, there's so many parallels there because it's life-changing as well. And it's a whole evolution of self that happens when you become a parent. But you can't go through something like that, either becoming an entrepreneur or becoming a parent, and not feel like there's something bigger than you. Like it just doesn't happen, you know?
Right. No, there is. And I think believing in something bigger and is important just to keep you grounded and keep the mission focus, right? Of like, I don't know. The more I become into this space of business ownership and leading and doing all these things, and even this podcast, the more it's like relying on spirit.
That's what I said. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
It's like I have yet to come across
and
someone.
it's crazy because I didn't grow up that way. I was very much more of a logical person. If you can't explain it with science, it doesn't make sense, you know? And now things are shifting.
And you're in that Saturn return.
Yeah.
It's like you're right there for it.
And you know what's funny about February of 2022? That was my first time going to family reunion for Keller Williams, which is like a really big event. And their values are God, family, then business.
How profound.
Yeah.
And they got you right there.
Got me. Right at the pinnacle moment, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty fascinating. Yeah. So what are you doing around town that now that you're here? Like how I know you're working a lot, you're homeschooling, you're doing all the things.
Yeah.
But where do you like to spend your time when you're not at home?
My husband and I do a lot of things together. Our family's like super tight.
That's sweet.
So yeah, the four of us and my in-laws live with me now. So we have now become like a multi-generational home, which has been a very fascinating experience. And the family thing is like really prominent in our day to day. So that's I do a lot of things with them. I take my kids to a lot of things just because they're, I love experiencing the world through them because they're so curious and so like just enamored with like life and things. So that's a lot of what I do. I also have been hosting more in-person teachings, which is like a new thing. A lot of my business and my immersives and workshops and stuff have been digital. Obviously, with 2020, that's kind of like the way everything went. But I first started as an entrepreneur teaching back in, 2011, 2012. I was doing in-person things. So I'm kind of trying to return to that now where I'm doing more in-person events and teaching opportunities because for me, a huge value of mine is accessibility, that people have access to this knowledge and to things like EFT, that it's not so inaccessible because the truth is a lot of people who do this work, their price point is crazy. And like even getting in to sit with someone to help you with something like this is just not possible for a lot of people. So I've been really working to create systems, that would foster more accessibility and make this something that more people can get their hands on because it's life-changing and they should be able to.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're the family, you guys are going out to eat. It's your birthday. We're celebrating. Where are we going?
It's my birthday. Birch and Vine is probably one of my favorite things ever. Mostly because of the lemon blueberry pancakes, I'm not going to lie. Like that meal. Have you not had this?
No.
Are you?
I know.
What are you doing with your life?
I'm sorry. I feel...
I'm completely rethinking this invitation.
I need to experience this.
Okay, yes. You're going to go for brunch.
Okay.
Is what you're going to do. Yep. And then you're going to order the lemon blueberry ricotta pancakes.
Okay.
You're going to eat the whole thing yourself. That's required.
Love that. Okay, that's good. No one's mentioned that.
So what?
Yeah. We haven't heard that,
Mistakes.
Right? No.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're gonna sit. You have to pick the right seating now. You're gonna sit
so the whole experience.
Yeah, up right like the little balcony. It's not really a balcony. It's sort of like a ledge to the restaurant.
Yep.
Because you know how they have like on the street seating.
Yep.
No, you don't want that one. You want to go up so that you can see, the downtown area really nice. And if it's really cold, to find a heating lamp. Sit next to one of those. Recommended.
Got it.
And then
you have this figured out.
Yeah. No. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yes, I like this. I like that. I like the attention to detail. Yeah.
I'm gonna either sit under the fan if it's the summer, or I'm gonna go find the heating lamp.
Okay, got it.
Strategic. And I'm always gonna go for brunch, and I'm always gonna order that. And I don't drink anymore, but when I did drink, the mimosa bar was fantastic. They have like multiple juice options, and they bring you all these little bottles, and you can just like make any kind of mimosa you want.
Cool.
Yeah, you can choose from like 4 different juices. It's a whole thing.
All right,
very nice.
That's great. That's great. Do you have any other favorites?
Trying to think. Gosh, there's like so many, and now my mind is like, of course.
I know, of course, when you ask the
because there's
question.
like so many. There's just so we're really big. Okay, so we're really big pizza people. So my favorite pizza place is Gianni's. Like I love that pizza spot so much. They're amazing, and their marinara sauce, you could just eat it.
I think I had that a couple nights. I think my family ordered that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's like we're pizza snobs. We just go have pizza everywhere.
Which is tough because pizza is, I'm originally from the Northeast, so it's a little bit of a different game up there than down here. So for me, I don't know that there's been a pizza that's been like.
Are you like a deep dish human?
I don't mind a deep dish. Yeah, but it's not like I don't need it.
Not for me.
Yeah, I don't need to have that.
I'm out of that.
Yeah. No, that's like Chicago area. No.
I'm out of that. But everybody has a preference. That's why I asked.
For
People are like I'm very
Yeah.
much more like, New York style. That's like my preferred. There's a really good place in Seminole, not St. Pete, but north of here, called Brooklyn something or other. It's next to that Crunch Fitness, next to Vampire Penguin, which is a great, oh my gosh, Vampire Penguin is such an interesting treat to have. It's like flavored ice. It's like, you know how they make snow cones, like the shaved ice, but they make it with like fancy ingredients, like cut strawberries and like cheesecake bites and like, so it's like a fluffy dessert that doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, like Cold Stone, right? Like when you leave there, you're like, I'm a horrible person when you eat ice cream.
Vampire
Penguin. It's such a cute name too for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's right. So that pizza place is right next to it. So just go to both places.
I'm okay with that. That's something different. That's cool. That's cool. See, we're learning something new. That's what I love that question because we get to learn about so many cool spots that, people like to, everyone's got a different flavor. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. Both of those solid.
You got a lot going on, heavily involved with the entrepreneurs in the area. We're going to Birch and Vine for brunch. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Hopefully people could hang with us.
Yeah.
If they're still here, what should they comment? One word in the comments.
One word in the comments. I would love to know the feeling this conversation inspired in people.
Oh, okay. So one word that describes a feeling.
Yes.
Okay, that's open-ended, but I'm for it. Okay, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
One word.
What's that experience that this has activated in you?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
That's where I'm putting my word, curious.
Curious. That's such a great word. It's one of my values, actually, is curiosity.
It's a great place to come
curious.
from. Come from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
Shakti, this has been awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you for having me.
Where are
This
they
was
going
fun.
again if they need to get in contact with you?
Just ShaktiRios.com, like my name.
And your Instagram? Because you're posting cool stuff on there as well.
Yes. So my Instagram handle is at @the_sovereign_Shakti.
Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Did we miss anything? I mean, a lot, I know. We could have gone on forever. This has already been an hour. Yeah. We could have been here for 3.
Yeah, there's so much.
If you want to know more, find her at ShaktiRios.com. Follow her on Instagram. This is fascinating. We could go on forever and ever and ever. Appreciate all of you for watching. Comment your word of how you're feeling. We appreciate you. And let us know who we should have on. This is episode 43. We're so grateful to make it this far. We're almost at our goal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Of doing one a week for a year. And we have already decided that season 2 it will be full effect.
Excellent.
For 2024. So thank you. Appreciate you. Share with a friend. And we'll see you on the next one. Boom.
Boom.
That was good. Yeah, I feel like we didn't even scratch